I have been married for 31 years. 31 years of cooking his meals, washing his shirts, and ironing the collars just the way he liked them. 31 years of sleeping beside him, of knowing the sound of his breathing, of reaching for his hand in the dark without even thinking about it. And I thought I knew everything about him. I thought I knew the way he took his coffee, 2 sugars, no milk. I thought I knew why he went quiet sometimes on Sunday afternoons, staring out the window with that faraway look in his eyes. I thought I knew the reason he sometimes whispered a name in his sleep that was not mine. I told myself it was nothing, a name from the past, a ghost that visited him sometimes. We all carry ghosts. I told myself that too. But the day I found the letters, that was the day I understood that some ghosts are not ghosts at all. Some of them are still very much alive, and some of them have been receiving handwritten letters from your husband every single year, on the very same date that he married you. I did not cry when I found them. That surprised me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the bed we had shared for 3 decades, and I held those envelopes in my hands and I just breathed, slowly, quietly. My name is Miriam, and this is my story, not a story of anger or revenge. It is a story of a woman who loved deeply, who was quietly broken, and who eventually found a way to put herself back together piece by careful piece. I want to tell you everything from the very beginning. I grew up in a small town called Alderton. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and where Sunday mornings smelled like coffee and fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. My mother was a seamstress, and my father drove a delivery truck. We were not rich, but we had warmth in the house, and we had each other. I was the middle child of 3 daughters. My older sister Constance was the smart one, my younger sister Bee was the funny one, and I was the quiet one, the one who sat by the window with a book, noticing things that others missed. I was 22 years old when I first met Thomas at a church summer social. Thomas was standing near the edge of the gathering. He was not quite part of the crowd, but he was not quite outside of it either. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the edges, and there was something about the way he stood still and calm that made me look at him twice. My friend Clara nudged me and said, "That's Thomas Merritt. He just moved here from the city." We talked that evening for a long time. He was easy to talk to, the kind of person who genuinely listens when you speak. He told me he'd grown tired of the city noise and rushed life. He wanted something quieter, something real. I told him Alderton was very real. He laughed a real laugh, and I thought to myself, this man is genuine. I was not entirely right about that, but I did not know it then. We courted for 2 years. Thomas was attentive, bringing wildflowers picked along the road and remembering small things I said. My mother liked him, telling me, "Miriam, that man has a good heart. He'll be good to you." We married in the spring, a small ceremony at the church where we had first met. Thomas stood at the altar, and when he saw me walking down the aisle, his eyes went soft. He looked at me like I was the most important thing in the room. He said, "I do," and I believed him completely. We moved into a small house, settled into a good, ordinary life, and soon had our son, Daniel, and our daughter, Ruth. Our house filled up with the sounds of children, and I was happy. I believed Thomas was too. Yet there were things I noticed over the years. Small things I filed away somewhere quiet inside myself. The way he sometimes seemed to drift away from a conversation without warning. The way certain songs on the radio made him turn his face toward the window. The way he kept a small tin box in the back of the closet that I never opened because I understood, without being told, that it was not mine to open. We do not always ask the questions we should. Sometimes choosing not to ask feels like the safest thing to hold a life together. I held us together for 31 years that way. It started changing subtly about 12 years into our marriage. Thomas began to travel more for work. When he came home from those trips, there was always a moment, just a flicker, where he seemed to come back from very far away. Not just from another city, but from somewhere else entirely. Then came the anniversaries. Our wedding anniversary was always on the 15th of April. 15 years in, I had planned a special dinner. That morning, I came downstairs to find Thomas at the kitchen table, writing carefully on a piece of paper. I asked him what he was writing. He folded the paper quickly, smiled, and said, "Just a note to a colleague, work thing." I said, "On our anniversary," he said. "It won't take long." I let it go. We went to dinner, and he was kind and attentive, holding my hand and telling me I looked beautiful. But when we got home, I saw him place that paper inside the tin box at the back of the closet. He did not know I was watching. I said nothing. The years continued. Our children grew up, went to university, and moved out. Our life shifted into something gentler. 2 people in their 50s, familiar and comfortable. Every year on the 15th of April, the ritual repeated. The careful handwriting, the quiet focus, the folded paper ending up in the tin box. I asked him about it once, the day after our anniversary. He looked at me steadily and said, "Just thoughts, Miriam, old memories, nothing that matters now." A part of me wanted to push, to ask why the secrecy. But the part of me that had kept our life together for so long said quietly, "Leave it. Let it be. You do not need to know everything." So I went back to the newspaper and told myself I was fine. But I began to pay attention to the details I had let myself overlook. The way he was distracted in the evenings, the way he occasionally left the room to take a phone call away from me. I noticed the tin box now had company. There was a small stack of sealed envelopes nestled behind some old hats on the shelf. I did not touch them. I stood in the hallway for a very long time, just breathing, telling myself they could be ordinary work notes or receipts. Life went on, and we eventually became great grandparents. Watching Thomas with Daniel's children, patient and playful, I felt a deep, aching love for him. But it was during one of those family visits in the autumn that I finally understood I could not keep looking away forever. It was a Saturday morning. Grandchildren were sleeping, and Thomas had gone to the study to look for a board game. I went to the bedroom closet to get extra blankets from the shelf because the morning was cold. When I reached up, the stack of envelopes shifted, and 3 of them fell to the floor at my feet. I stood there looking at them. They were sealed white envelopes, addressed in Thomas's careful handwriting. No return address, no stamps. They had never been mailed, and the name written on the front of each one was not my name. The name was Aliner. I said it out loud in the quiet room. Aliner, a name I had never heard Thomas speak. My hands were perfectly, unnaturally still as I sat down on the edge of our bed and opened the first letter. I did not feel like I was doing something wrong. When you have given 31 years of your life to a person, when you have built everything together and chosen love every single day, I think you earn the right to know what you've been choosing it in spite of. The first letter was dated 12 years ago on our 21st wedding anniversary. It didn't begin with "Dear Aliner." It simply began as if the conversation had been happening quietly for a very long time. He wrote about the spring, a particular road in a city from his work trips, and a restaurant where they had once eaten. He wrote, "I do not expect you to remember these things the way I do, but I need to write them down somewhere. You were real, Aliner. What we had was real. I just need to say that somewhere, even if it's only to paper." I set that letter down and picked up the second one, written on our 25th silver anniversary. That was the night we had celebrated with a big family party, where Thomas had given a beautiful speech calling me the anchor of his life. Yet later that same night, he had written to Aliner, "Another year has passed. I think of you often, in ways I cannot explain to anyone else. I have a good life, Aliner. I want you to know that. But there is a corner of it, just one small corner, that has always been yours. I don't think that will ever change." The third letter was from our 28th anniversary, a rainy day we had spent comfortably together making soup and reading. In that letter, Thomas wrote something that took the breath out of me. "I wonder sometimes what our life would have looked like. I know I shouldn't. I chose differently, Aliner, and I would make the same choice again because Miriam is a good woman, a better woman than I deserve. She loves me completely, and I have never once doubted that. But I cannot make this corner of myself go away. Believe me, I have tried. 28 years and I have tried." I read those words 3 times. A better woman than I deserve. He had known all along exactly what he was doing and what it cost. He had known what I was giving and what he was keeping from me. I heard Thomas coming down the hallway. He stepped into the room carrying the board games, smiling. Then he saw me on the bed with the letters and his smile vanished. We looked at each other in total silence. Thomas put the game down, sat heavily in the chair by the window, and put his hands in his lap. I asked, "Who is Aliner?" He looked at the floor, then at me, his face showing something older and heavier than guilt. He said, "She was someone I knew before you." He told me everything then, while our family slept in the other rooms. Aliner had been his first love when he was 20. They had been together for 3 years and had planned a future. But she became seriously ill with cancer, and her family moved her away for treatment. Her family did not approve of Thomas, keeping him away. In his youth and fear, he didn't know how to fight, and his letters were returned unopened. Eventually, he stopped calling. Years later, he learned she had survived and built a separate life elsewhere. The letters he wrote every anniversary were never meant to be sent. They weren't an active affair. He said, "I needed somewhere to put it, Miriam. I needed somewhere to put what I couldn't let go of, so it didn't have to be inside me all the time." I sat with that for a long time. A part of me wanted to feel the relief of knowing there was no real woman waiting for him in another city. But relief was not what I felt. What I felt was the crushing weight of 31 years. For 3 decades, I had loved this man with my whole heart, given him everything, and raised his children. And all along, on the very days we celebrated our commitment, he was secretly, tenderly somewhere else, keeping a corner of himself locked away from me. I said very quietly, "All these years, you could have told me." He replied, "I know, Miriam, I know." I put the letters on the bed between us, stood up, smoothed my skirt, and said, "The children will need us for breakfast." Then I walked out. I made breakfast, talked to my grandchildren, and remained outwardly calm, but inside I was very far away. Thomas sat across from me, barely eating, looking like a man waiting for the ground to open up beneath him. After our children and grandchildren left that afternoon, the front door closed, leaving us alone with a heavy silence. Thomas finally asked, "Do you want me to go?" I let the question sit in the air before replying, "I want you to be honest with me. For the first time, properly honest. Can you do that?" He said yes. We sat in our living room for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, talking in a way we never had before, painfully, deeply, and honestly. What I am telling you is messier and more human than a simple story of a victim and a villain. That evening, Thomas shared the full shape of his past grief. He had carried the terrible trauma of abruptly losing his first love into our marriage without ever revealing it. Listening to him, I felt a complex wave of emotions. I felt sad for the young man who had lost something before knowing how to hold on to it, carrying that loneliness for 31 years. I felt angry because he had actively chosen secrecy over trusting me, keeping a door closed between us. And I felt a profound grief for the marriage I thought I had, realizing it was built on a reality that wasn't entirely solid. I asked him point blank, "Did you love me, Thomas? Or was I just the choice you made when the one you wanted wasn't available?" He was quiet for a moment, moment, then said, "Miriam, I love you in a way that is completely different from anything else I have ever felt. What I felt for Alina was real, but what I feel for you is my life. You are the person I chose to build everything with. That was not a consolation prize." I asked why he kept writing the letters, and he answered, "Because I didn't know how to let go of the past, and I thought if I kept it contained in a box once a year, it couldn't hurt anyone." I was wrong. I told him I needed time and space to process everything. That night, I quietly made up the bed in the guest room. He nodded, offering no arguments, and I lay in the dark for a long time. I did not sleep well for several weeks. I spent those days thinking deeply and slowly. I thought about Alina, realizing she was as much a victim of circumstances as anyone, holding no malice toward me. I thought about Thomas not just as a secret keeper, but the whole man who had held my hand through my mother's death, who comforted our children through nightmares, and who loved our family completely. And I thought about myself. I had spent 31 years looking away when things became too difficult, trading my own fullness for peace because I feared the truth would cost too much. Now that I had the truth, it was sad and complicated, but it made my life entirely real for the first time. There was an unexpected sense of relief in that honesty. 3 weeks later, I asked Thomas to take a walk with me in the autumn afternoon light. After walking in silence for a while, I said, "I am not leaving you, Thomas, but things need to change. I cannot live with hidden things anymore. I want us to be really honest about everything. I want us to be the people we should have been from the beginning." He reached for my hand, saying, "We can try to be those people now." It was a late start, but it wasn't too late. The months that followed were incredibly difficult. The anger would come in quiet, sharp waves, and I had to learn to sit with it instead of swallowing it down. Thomas remained remarkably patient, never minimizing my pain or defending his actions. He simply listened. We started seeing a marriage counselor, Dr. Ashfield, meeting every 2 weeks for a year. In those sessions, we stripped away our armor. I learned about the internal dynamics of Thomas, a boy who lost his father young, and learned to cope with grief by locking it away in a box, genuinely believing that letting emotions out would drown his entire life. I also learned about myself, the woman who kept the peace at the cost of her own voice. Understanding these flaws didn't instantly fix our marriage, but it made rebuilding possible. About 6 months into counseling, I asked him directly what he wanted to do with the tin box. He took it down from the closet shelf, held it tightly, looked at me, and said, "I think I should let it go. I choose to let it go, not because you're asking, but because it's time." I left the room to give him his privacy, and when he was done, the box was gone. I never asked what he did with the letters. The act of him choosing our present over his past was all that mattered. The following April, on our 32nd wedding anniversary, Thomas took me to the coast. We walked along the shore in the quiet morning light, the water reflecting shades of gray and silver. He did not write any letters that year. Instead, he held my hand tightly, completely present in the same space with me. It wasn't a perfect day, and we weren't a perfect couple, but we were two people who had survived a devastating fracture and were still choosing each other. An imperfect, chosen love felt infinitely more meaningful than a perfect one taken for granted. I am 61 years old now, and Thomas is 63. We are still learning and growing together. When our children and grandchildren visit, filling the house with beautiful, chaotic noise, I watch Thomas interact with them with a full heart. People often ask about forgiveness, how it works, and if it's even possible. What I have learned is that forgiveness is not a single, grand declaration. It is a daily practice. It means choosing to stay soft on the days an old memory or a specific date threatens to harden your heart. It means choosing to carry the scar with grace. To anyone standing in the wreckage of a sudden, painful truth, I want to say, give yourself time. Do not let the world rush you into making immediate, drastic decisions. Grief doesn't follow a neat schedule. You are fully allowed to feel angry, heartbroken, and deeply in love all at the same time. Choosing to stay and rebuild what was broken is not a sign of weakness. It is its own profound, quiet strength. Our marriage is not a fairy tale with a flawless ending, because real life doesn't provide those. It provides continuation. Thomas told me recently that these past 2 years have been the most honest of his life, noting that it took the terrifying prospect of losing us to finally understand how to fully be a part of us. He is entirely right. Sometimes it takes almost losing a life to truly understand its value. I do not regret marrying him. Despite the hidden letters and the painful silences, this life is mine. My children, my grandchildren, and the decades of shared ordinary mornings belong to me, and I wouldn't trade them for any alternative path. Alina was never my enemy. She was simply a woman who loved and lost early in life. Understanding that has washed away any lingering blame. Love is rarely a straight, simple line. The human heart is fully capable of holding more than one true thing at once, and being loved completely does not always mean occupying every single historical corner of a person's soul. It is a hard truth to accept, but it is real. I am no longer the quiet woman hiding in the background of my own life to keep an artificial peace. I am taking up my rightful space, asking the hard questions, and speaking my mind. Through the crack in our foundation, a raw, beautiful honesty entered our home. We are finally two people truly living our lives together, rather than just existing beside each other. 32 years ago, he said, "I do." After everything, I know he finally means it with every part of his soul. And I said, "I do, too." I still mean it.